welcome to Crosspoint. I will survive. Who doesn't love a little Gloria Gaynor to get us going? Today we're going to be taking a look at how to be more resilient in the face of adversity. So if you've got some small or not so small disruptions going on in your life, believe it or not, you're in a great place to see and experience God working in this moment. And we're going to be talking about that today, so be encouraged. Hey, I'm Vince, and I'm thrilled that you're tuning in with us today for week 2 of one of the best things that happens around here all year, At the Movies 11. That's right, 11 years in running, we've been taking a look at some of the biggest movies of the year and the spiritual fibers that weave in, around, and through each of these films. And today, we are so excited to dive in one of the year's hottest movies, Air, Courting a Legend, and what we can learn about adversity from the early years of the Nike brand and the pursuit of the greatest athlete in the history of basketball, Michael Jordan. It's going to be amazing. Now, if you've joined us before, hey, welcome back. And if this is your first time with us, we certainly hope it's the first of many. We built this place for people who don't have it all together to be able to take steps to explore faith and what it means to know and follow Jesus. And if that's you, we're especially grateful you decided to be with us. Now, the cool part about joining us during At the Movies 11 is if it's your first time with us, you've got some free movie tickets coming your way. And here's how you can get them. If you scan this QR code, it'll take you directly to our digital connection card. Include your name, your email, and any information you're willing to share with people like us. And we'll send some tickets to you in the mail this week, simply as a way of saying thank you for joining us today. And if someone invited you, we'd love to know that too, and you can let us know on that form as well. Now, while you're doing that, there are some amazing ways to connect around this place that we'd like to show to you. The first is a great event that's going to take place right here at the Crosspoint campus for students in grades 7 through 12. Take a look. The chase begins tonight, which is a multi-week competition filled with challenges, team building, opportunities to make new friends, and relevant messages from dynamic speakers, and each week is designed to be an easy point of entry for new students, including incoming 7th graders. So students, we hope to see you here tonight at 6 p.m. Next, you and I have the opportunity to change a life on the other side of the world through something as simple as school supplies. Check this out. Here's what's so cool. Those backpacks of school supplies the students were holding up, that's because of you. That's from last year's backpack initiative. And again this year, for just a $25 donation, you can provide an entire year's worth of school supplies for a student. So scan the QR code to get started and include VPA backpacks in the memo on your donation. And let's sponsor these 400 students. And speaking of making a difference, one of the things we work really hard to do here is offer a variety of ways for folks to get involved. Life is for hand raisers, and we want to give you a reason to be one. So if you're interested in getting outside of yourself and serving bigger, check out this QR code and explore the many ways to join a team and volunteer around here, whether that be with our kids, students, or welcoming people at the front door, or even joining the band. And to know that in doing so, you're part of changing the trajectory of lives and families for eternity. That's pretty cool. So let us know. We'd love to help you join a team. All right, we've got a great service for you today. Hey, if we're honest, we can probably all use a little more resiliency and infusion of hope and encouragement when the distractions and challenges of life come. So let's take a look at this through the lens of the movie Air. Here's the trailer.
1984 has been a tough year. Our sales are down, our growth is down.
Sonny, I brought you in here to grow the basketball business.
People don't know what the hell a Nike is.
What's a Converse?
NBA All-Star shoe.
There's nothing cool about Nike.
You would have to have a pretty compelling pitch.
I can tell them the one thing the other companies can't compete with. Our basketball division is terrible.
I do not love it. This is where you come up with a brilliant idea that no one else can see. Let's hear it.
I got it. I found him.
Who's that? Jesus? Can't afford it.
I'm willing to bet my career on one guy. My name's Sonny Vaccaro. I'm with Nike.
Do you typically make it a habit of showing up at people's front doors unannounced?
I don't like to take no for an answer.
Oh, man. Here we go.
You ask me what I do here. This is what I do. I find you players, and I feel it this time. Yeah, okay, it's risky. When you were selling sneakers out of the back of your Plymouth, that was risky. Don't change that now.
For a rookie?
Yes.
Who's never set foot on an NBA court.
That's the literal definition of rookie, yeah.
What's the plan?
We build a shoe line around just him. I need the greatest basketball shoe that's ever been made.
Who's the player?
Michael Jordan.
Your motor is...
You have our attention.
I believe in your son. I believe he's the future. And his story is gonna make us want to fly. But a shoe is just a shoe.
Until my son steps into it.
You got a name for it?
Air Jordan.
I don't know.
Seriously?
Maybe it'll grow on me.
Oh man, this is going to be fun. We're going to be taking a look at this movie Air and really just looking at some of the spiritual threads, some of the fibers of faith that this movie has in it. So man, excited you're here. My name's Curt, and if you're here for the first time, welcome. Excited to have you with us. And let's make some noise for those tuning in online this weekend across our city, state, nation. Man, so excited to have you join us this weekend. And if you're here for the first time in the room, if you're here for the first time online, you've got free movie tickets, as Vince said. And so make sure you scan this QR code, fill out the connection card, let us know your name, at least your email address. That way we can connect with you, send you these tickets this week. All right, we're going to be taking a look at Air, Courting a Legend. And out of curiosity, how many of us have seen this film, just so I know? Okay, yeah, let's give it up for those that have seen this. You might actually decide, as a result of some of what you're going to see today, to go watch this. Here's the basics. This is it follows the history of the sports marketing executive, a guy by the name of Sonny Vaccaro. And he's in pursuit of what has become the greatest basketball player to ever play the game, Michael Jordan. He's just starting his career. He sees something great in him. And you know, everybody in this film is experiencing some headwind. Sonny, he's had some misses when it comes to talent and choosing talent. Nike is like third in market share at the time behind Adidas and Converse, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we kind of push through the challenges that we're in? And then of course you have Michael Jordan, who, if you know anything about his story, he certainly had a share of adversity in his life. And so all of these figures, and even as an organization, are pushing through, trying to figure out, okay, how do we be resilient in the face of adversity? Now, over the 2 or 3 weeks when this film came out, we went to see it, my wife and I, and then we took our kids. Right, kids, you got to go see this amazing movie. They'd enjoyed it. We loved it more because the music. Did you guys enjoy the music in the trailer, by the way? Was that not amazing? Holy cow. Just the 80s music in general. And then my wife and I went out for a date night the next weekend, and there was really nothing else on. So we're like, let's just see Air again. So we went to Flicks and had dinner and watched it again. And then I took my staff team the next week because there are so many leadership principles. So I think I saw it 4 times in the first 2 weeks this movie was out. And so every time I watch it, it grips me. There's something in it. I find myself in the story. And I almost find it therapeutic because, you know, there's something about this storyline, and it kind of just lifts up the plight of the everyday person, the everyday worker, all the way to the plight of a superstar. And one of the things that's not discriminatory, regardless of where you fall in that spectrum, is the challenges and adversity that come our way. And so this is what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at this question: how do I become more resilient in the face of adversity? Because this is a value that I think we all want. And I'm telling you, this makes life so much better when we can do this. So here's a simple definition of resiliency right here. Resiliency is simply bouncing back from disruption. Bouncing back from disruption. Now, all of us have experienced disruptions, even today. You probably had some disruptions today. You certainly probably had some disruptions in your week. This is something for those of you tuning online. We're not going to be able to hear from you in this moment, but those in the room, just shout out something that you experienced as a disruption over this past week. Anybody have something? Work. Work is definitely a disruption. What else? Weather. Yes, weather. Any others? Miss the bus. That creates a disruption for the whole family. You know, we experience disruptions all the time. And we can kind of joke about them. We've got the weather. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too rainy. It's not raining enough. You know, too much pollen. Work gets in the way of life. Missing the school bus. Car battery isn't performing the way it should. My iPhone, you know, isn't getting service. My battery's dying. The air conditioning went out in our house. I mean, there's all kinds of little disruptions that just create, you know, challenges for us. And then, there's just a wide spectrum. And then we could go a little deeper. I mean, we could get into like relational issues. And, you know, maybe there's something going on with your kids or perhaps with your aging parents. And maybe you have rebellious kids and aging parents or rebellious parents and aging kids. Maybe you're dealing with some kind of health, challenge or problem or a job layoff. I mean, there's a whole litany of disruptions that we experience, and some of them are just little blips in the radar. Others are kind of like mess our lives up for a while. And so again, resilience is just when we have the ability to bounce back through those disruptions. Now, for the sake of conversation today, one of my fears, concerns is that I know some of us are going through some pretty massive things right now. And to think that I'm going to offer any kind of advice or, emotional satisfaction, with some of the more difficult stuff you may be dealing with is kind of silly to think that's going to be the case. But I do want you to know that I really believe God has something for every single one of us, wherever we are in the disruption spectrum. And resiliency is really this ability to roll with the punches. It's this ability to, approach an adverse situation with creativity and positivity and the ability to see a challenge as an opportunity to learn and to understand, okay, what's my role? What's not my role in the midst of this? Now, a couple weekends ago, we had Ann Smith here, an interview with Ann Smith, who's one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. She's 98 years old. Yeah, you can cheer for Ann. Let's give it up for Ann. If you were here, man, Ann was amazing, amazing. My wife and I spent a little time with her, and what you often don't hear about is her husband, Nathan. Nathan, just a sage of wisdom as well. He passed away about 20 years ago. And when we were talking with her that afternoon, Ann said, Nathan once said, I want to give you a quote from her husband, Nathan. He said, I can't keep the birds from flying over my head, but I can prevent them from building a nest above me. I'm like, man, that is some wisdom right there. I mean, you can't control the birds going over your head. There's no way to do that. But you can develop some of the things that begin to get built above you, around you, that fence you in, that cause you to feel like I'm being affected adversely and don't have any control over things around me. And so, whether you're someone who considers yourself a resilient person or not, I just want you to know that whatever you're going through right now, whatever disruption you may be experiencing, whether even those little, less meaningful ones, each of those are building something that's actually getting you ready for the bigger ones that are coming. Now, before we kind of dig into this and take a look at what God has to say about this, I want to give us a little word picture here, kind of a visual picture, some charts and graphs, if you will, that I think will help us to better understand how we go through this, because sometimes the visual helps us on this. So we're going to tell this bouncing back, and as you can see, you got the XY axis, and we're going to have morale on the Y axis. We're going to have time on the X axis. We're going to talk about how we feel about life over time. And, the way, disruption happens is there's usually a curve with it. You see curves like this. If you work in finance or healthcare or education or really anything that follows trends, you're familiar with the bell curve or the inverse bell curve. And something that's fascinating is we've all experienced this. I think we all can say, yeah, I've gone through the ups and the downs, come out of it. There's been brokenness, there's been disruptions, there's been things that's caused pain, things I couldn't fix. And then I begin to come out on the other side of it. And, what seemed like horrible, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get through this, you begin to have some hope. And then we discover eventually we're better off for it, which is crazy. If you ever have thought, God, I had never thought that thing I'd be better off because of it, that's kind of what adversity does for us. It actually makes us better off. And, somebody came along and said, this kind of process we go through, the challenges, the changes, the trials, it's almost like the 5 stages of grief. And so Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she created the 5 stages of grief 45, 50 years ago. And she you can almost lay her principles right over this. And so I want to kind of walk through this real quick, because the first one, just a little blip where you kind of go down a little bit, but you can hardly tell. This phase is usually where we experience denial. And it's almost like you have the little blip and you're like, did that just happen? I mean, and sometimes we ignore it because we don't feel like it's anything big. In fact, like when COVID set in March 2020, I think a lot of us were like, is this really happening? I mean, surely this isn't happening. It's almost like we were in denial. And then all of a sudden, things just like went down fast. And quickly anger builds in. And that's the next process. Anger is where you begin to be angry at other people. Who did this? You did this. You created this. And then we turn that anger toward ourselves. We begin to say, well, I must have done this. I must have made a mistake. I obviously didn't catch this. And we begin to feel an immense responsibility. And if you have a heightened responsibility, you get stuck right here, just blaming yourself. And then this isn't on the screen, but like kind of between here and the bottom is where we start bartering. We start bartering, gosh, I don't know what to do. Like for instance, I had some battery problems in a car this week. And I'm like, start. I will change your oil this week if you'll just start. So we start bartering with even inanimate things. And then we kind of bottom out in what's called despair. And this is where you kind of hit rock bottom and you just end up, kind of even depressed sometimes. A depression sets in. And then as you begin to realize and accept that, you move into what's called the acceptance phase. And this is where you begin to say, okay, I have to accept where I am, but I can begin to see a pathway out. I can begin to see a little bit of hope and see things in a more positive way. And then you begin to climb out and you get back to where you're thriving. Not just surviving, as we heard earlier, I will survive. And that fantastic. You guys enjoy the cover this weekend? Woo, man, I tell you what, I will survive. But actually getting to thriving. And what I've discovered is this process is actually a catalyst. This whole process, when we go through this is a catalyst for actually developing something in us. And one of the things that happens is resilience allows us to get through this process with more speed and with less impact on our lives. It's kind of like TSA pre-check. If you've ever used TSA pre-check, it's like you still got to go through TSA, but you just get through quicker and with less impact on your life, less stress. That's kind of what resilience does for us. And, in this movie, Air, these various storylines. I mean, we see Sonny Vaccaro, and he's trying to, kind of see if he can, still, land some big talent. And you've got Nike, who's struggling, and they've got just facing all kinds of headwinds of adversity. And then you've got, Michael Jordan, who has had his share of adversity that went all the way back to his high school days and began to shape him in terms of the person he's becoming. And so before we dig deeper into that, I want to take a look at what God has to say about this. And I want to introduce you to somebody who had their fair share of adversity in their life. This is a guy who taught about resilience. And this is a guy who experienced some pretty significant things in his life, a guy by the name of James. Now, James is famous because he's like the biological, literal brother of Jesus. All right, kind of a big deal, right? So like he's growing up, his brother probably is like, hey, just want to let you know I'm from God, and I'm sure James is like, well, yeah, okay, if you believe that, I believe that too. I mean, I'm from God. God created me. I mean, we all are. And Jesus is like, no, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. Like, I am God. All right, I am God. And, I'm sure James is like, all right, dude, seriously. I mean, if you want to believe that, you go for it. But like, do me a favor. When we go to school this week, like, don't mention it to our friends. Like, that's kind of weird, a little bizarre. Like, let's just keep this to ourselves. James did not buy in. James, it took him a long time. I mean, he was into his adult life before he ever changed his mind on this. But the thing that caused him to change his mind is when he saw his brother begin to talk about his death and this impending resurrection, that he was actually going to return. And then he watched him pull it off. And so for him, it wasn't just that he began to believe in who his brother was. He goes, okay, apparently he is a little bit different than me. But it wasn't just something he read. He actually saw it with his eyes. He met with his brother after he had come out of the grave. And so James goes like all in. And he actually experienced a lot of pain and adversity as a result of that. In fact, somewhere around 62, 66 AD, James was actually martyred for what he believed about his brother. And the message and movement of Jesus, I mean, is very, very dangerous, especially back in the first century. And he was stoned. He was stoned like with clubs, beaten with a club to death is what it's believed. He gave his life because of what he believed about his brother. So this is a guy that knows something about resilience. All right, this isn't a guy who's like, I had a breakup in middle school, which is a big deal at the moment. He's like, no, I've actually gone through some pretty big deals. And so he's writing to these first century people who are following Jesus, and he's telling them, hey, you're going to go through trials. There's going to be seasons where, man, you're going to face headwinds and you're not going to know what to do. I want to teach you how to handle those and how to approach the disruptions. And see, this is where in the movie Air, this is where Sonny, who's working on behalf of the basketball side of Nike, he's actually sitting down. We're going to watch this scene in a few moments, in a few minutes, just to let me show you this amazing speech where he just kind of says, hey, Michael, look, here's why you ought to buy in and go with us instead of the other big two, shoe manufacturers. But he digs deeper. He says, because there's something happening in you. You've been through some things. And I see greatness in you. Not because there's just something special about you, but because you have actually been shaped and formed, and I think there's going to be something incredible happening. Now, before we watch that, let's take a look at what James says right here. James, he says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, which I love how he starts this. He's like, you're my brothers, you're my sisters, we're all in this together. I mean, we all experience this together. None of us are void of this. He says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face, and look at this last phrase, trials of many kinds. All right, he's like, yeah, this is going to happen. All right, you're going to experience trials. You're going to have change and disruption. They're like kissing cousins to taxes and death. All right, it's going to happen. All right, you can't get around it. There's no way around it. All right, and so he says these things are going to come, and how well you do is going to be dependent on your attitude when you face it. That's why he says, consider it pure joy. All right, he says, I want you to consider it. Now, this phrase, consider it, this is the Koinonia Greek, which is like highbrow Greek. Nobody really spoke it back in the first century. I haven't studied it. I mean, I have a button online where I can go and it tells me exactly what the word is. So it's interesting because these two words, consider, is actually a verb, but it's way more than like hey, you got to think about this. It's a good idea to consider. In our language, no, it means this idea of you need to lead yourself as if this is true. You need to get to the place where you regard this as so, where you train yourself to actually see this whole deal differently. And he's not saying, hey, I'm asking you to be joyful for the adversity or trial you're going through. He's not saying that. He said, I want you to say, I'm going to be joyful in it, in the midst of it. And when we do this, we make ourselves more or less vulnerable to how that affects us based on our perspective and how we approach it. In fact, one of my favorite leaders in shaping the next generation is a guy by the name of Tim Elmore, and he has a blog called growingleaders.com/blog, which I love, never gets old. and he, in one of his blogs, talks about this study that was done, this longitudinal study a number of years ago, where over the period of 20 years, they studied over 600 children in the inner city. And they followed them and they measured quantitatively and qualitatively, and they were trying to discover what's the difference between the kids that are facing the same circumstances, but they seem to come out of this and thrive, and those that never seem to be able to get out of their circumstances. And one of the things they found is the students that just seemed to be better at life than the rest were the ones who had what's called an internal locus of control. And you maybe remember this from psychology class. An internal locus of control is individuals who assume responsibility for their lives. They're like, I can choose how I am going to navigate life. Versus somebody who has an external locus of control, who is somebody who assumes external forces, the circumstances, whatever's going on around them, I'm just at the mercy of whatever's happening around me. No, it's these students who have an internal locus of control that actually excel, where they say, okay, I'm not my circumstances. All right, I'm separate from that. And one of the things they found is that resilient children were actually kids who saw their own future as something that they could determine. That they could actually choose how they navigate and how they choose to see the struggles that come at them, and that they could actually go around them, and those didn't have to define them. Meaning, again, our perspective is huge, huge, huge when it comes to the things we face. Essentially, what James is telling us right here, he's like, consider it pure joy. That you're going to have a different experience when you do that. You can imagineer your own future. All right, life's not happening to you, you are happening to life. And so James is saying, you have to consider that there's something good that's going to come out of this trial or this adversity. And then he goes on to verse 3, and he says, because you know that the testing of your faith, it produces something. It produces perseverance. Now, faith could be faith in yourself. When you test faith in yourself and have more confidence, you just go to the next level, but also faith in our Creator and our Heavenly Father. When we test our faith, it actually grows. It takes us places. There's an ultra marathoner, a guy by the name of Dick Collins. And he has some incredible insight from running that he's learned that can help us face those headwinds in life. He says, you have to decide the conditions that are going to cause you to stop and drop out before the race. You don't want to be out there saying, well, gee, my legs hurt, I'm a little dehydrated, I'm sleepy, I'm tired, it's cold and windy. He says, as a result, you're going to talk yourself into quitting. If you're making your decision based on how you feel at the moment, you will probably make the wrong decision. He said, you got to decide ahead of time. I mean, there's going to be headwinds. There's going to be adversity when you're running. Some of you are like, I don't even know why people like that do that. Why do people run? Like why would they even want to be an ultimate marathoner? Because if you're like me, you're like, I jog like a few miles a day. But like when I was in high school and I played sports, like when we screwed around and got in trouble or we didn't perform well in the game the previous night, what was the punishment? It was endurance running. I mean, it was like punishment to run. So it's like, sometimes like, why would I do that for fun? But see, these people, listen, they're not going out and being like, man, I want to put one of those 26.2 stickers on my car. They're not doing that. They realize that they started an entirely different place. They didn't just go out and like do 26 miles. They actually started with 1 mile. But what Dick said, even the 1 mile, I mean, if you begin to go, oh man, it's rough, it's hard, it's cold out here, and you never really push through the 1 mile, you're never going to actually get any further than that. Because you develop the 1 mile, and eventually you get to like a 5K, 3.1 miles, and then maybe a 10K, 6.2 miles, and then a half marathon, and then a marathon. It's about building something and deciding ahead of time, okay, I'm going to face some adversity, but I'm not going to, what are the things that are going to take me out? What are the things that cause me to pull out? Because if I decide in the moment, I'm probably going to make the wrong decision. So James, he says, when you do this, there's actually a payoff that begins to take place. He says, if you'll just look at your trials, your disruptions, and say, okay, I'm going to try to find joy in this, it's going to develop this thing in you. It's going to lead to something. And he goes on, he says, let perseverance finish its work that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Meaning, like, we got to go through the hard stuff. See, when we just sit around and we don't have anything difficult going on, the temptation is to avoid the pain. The temptation is to avoid having to go through anything difficult. And James is like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You got to fight against that because you got to actually fight for resilience. You got to lean into that moment. And you got to change your mindset. And instead of fighting against experiencing any pain, you got to say, I'm going to lean into this moment and I'm going to fight for the resilience that I want to be built in me because that's going to prepare me today for something coming tomorrow. And see, here's the thing. You know this, but we have all kinds of situations and experiences going on in our lives right now. And you might be in the midst of some pretty steep headwinds right now as you sit here today, as you're sitting at home, as you're sitting in a coffee shop. You might be experiencing some things going, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Others of us, you're in a good place right now. You're like, oh man, I'm actually doing pretty good. You need to do a happy dance if that's where you are, because those are just great days. But see, here's the thing, and I don't mean to be, fatalistic or kind of like depressing or anything, but there is something around the corner, all right? There's something around the corner for all of us that you and I don't know about. And instead of fighting, against these little distractions, these little, moments where it's an inconvenience, and we're like, oh man, I want to push around that. I don't have to deal with that. Instead, if we even take the little moments, James says, if you will lean into those moments and even the little disruptions, consider them a joy. That annoying person at work that you're like, I don't want to interact with them, or the annoying person at school at lunch. If you say, well, I'm going to endure that. I'm going to actually be kind. I'm going to be in their presence. Maybe it's the traffic you bumped into today, and that just put a whole kink in your day. Whatever that disruption is, there's something for us to learn in this. And he's saying if you would take that and allow it to do its work, it would actually get you ready for tomorrow. Because see, one of the things I've discovered is it's only when you only win the big trials when you learn from the small trials. from the small disruptions. Anybody remember great little kids book? Like when I was younger, it's called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Anybody remember Going on a Bear Hunt? We're going to catch a big one. Yeah, you remember that book? And remember they like this kid's with his dad and his siblings, and it's like they have to go through, all this stuff. They have to go through the forest, and it's getting dark, and they have to go through, the brush and the river and the icky, sticky mud, and then it snows. I mean, they got to go through the snowstorm. And, they get to the place where, kind of the big line at the end of the story is, you can't go over it, and you can't go under it, and you can't go around it. You got to go what? Yeah, you got through it. You got to go through it. And I know some of you are like, Curt, you kind of mess that line up. It's not exactly the way the book goes. I'm a generalist, just so you know, that's generally like the message of the book, right? That's a Curt Walters paraphrase version right there. All right, and so I don't need an email later just to tell me exactly how it goes. That's the paraphrase. You can't go over it. You can't go around it. You got to go through it. See, the same is true for you and me. All right, everything in us wants to go around difficult moments, around something that just is going to be difficult. But James is saying if you're going to actually get better for it when you go right through it. So this scene is probably one of my favorite scenes in this movie. And this might inspire you to actually go watch it if you haven't seen it. This is where Sonny Vaccaro, he brings Michael and his family in, and he's trying to sell him on why he should choose Nike to go with as his sponsor. So take a look at this. Man, I'll tell you what. Every time I watch that, I get a bit emotional. There's this line, it's not whether you rise or fall, but are you going to be able to fight on? Are you going to be able to summon the will to rise again? Every time I see that, I'm like, I find myself in that scene because, and you probably do as well, because we've all been there, right? This, again, is why movies are so fascinating to us. It's why we're drawn to them, because we find ourselves in the narrative right here. We hear that and we say, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly, I want to experience what he's experienced. There's something inside of us that goes, yes, God, I want to know that kind of power, that kind of experience. I want to know that, man, yes, I'm going to fall, but I can get back up. And I am going to be able to be successful and thrive again. Listen, I don't know exactly what God's purpose specifically is for you. All right, I just know for me and generally for you, it's that you become the person that God created you to be. That is ultimately what God's desire is for you. That's probably your prayer for your kids, that they become, the person they're created to be. That's probably your prayer for your siblings, for your parents, for your spouse, that they become, God, would you just help us become the person we were created to be? And the only way to become that person is to go through trials. And you're going to go through the small ones. And in the midst of those, the little blips, the little things that don't seem that big, but those things are going to build something. And when the bigger ones come, what's going to happen is those small ones prepared you so the big ones don't take you down. A couple weeks ago, my dad, we had a family gathering, and he brought a bag of pictures to me, and some of my brothers from our growing up years, and they were just sitting on the counter till just this past week. I picked it up, started flipping through them, and I found a couple of my high school basketball day pictures. I just thought, since we're talking Michael, I'd show you mine, because we're pretty much like the same fabric right there. And as I was looking at these, this took me back to a pretty significant time in my life, because I was 17 at the time. And I had just come off a season where I missed the entire season from a devastating shoulder injury that took me out of sports for an entire year. Had to have a repair, months and months of therapy and rehabilitation. Got back on, to where I could play. And so even seeing this, it took me back, and I just thought, wow, that seemed like so big at that moment. Like one of the biggest things I'd ever gone through, the adversity of that. And it certainly was at that time. And it was a very, very defining thing in terms of pushing through, and even defining, asking the question, who am I? Am I actually going to push through this? And, fast forward, there's been a lot of adversity at different seasons over the years. But even as I think of where I am today, think about the last 3 or 4 years, there's been some strong headwinds. just even organizationally and as a leader, as a pastor in our world, we've experienced big headwinds. We've experienced them here at Crosspoint. A lot of just adversity of trying to get back, to rebuild. And as I was thinking back to when I was 17, I also did some reflection on the last 15, 16 years here at Crosspoint, and I actually made a list. of just like, where are the moments where we've just been like, oh gosh, God, I don't know if we're going to, make it through year number one. I mean, and I wrote down about 15 different moments over 15 years from, when we were over at the school to trying to get this building off the ground to, seasons where there were just some pretty, big things that we were facing and just not knowing, God, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. And yet here I am still today. And I thought, I don't know that I would have made it through the past 3 or 4 years, because resiliency doesn't get developed in those moments. It actually happened right there when I was 17 on the basketball court. And Michael's trajectory took a little different than mine, but it happened there. It didn't happen on the big stage. And you might be asking, so where do I start on this? Like, how do I begin to develop this? Well, there's a couple steps. First step in the process, it starts with finding the purpose in the pain. Finding the purpose in the pain. Finding the purpose in the problem. Because when it comes to the bigger ones, the more difficult ones, some of you might be going through some really, really significant disruption right now. If you're going through a massive one, it might not be the best time to find the purpose in the pain. You may need to get just your feet on the ground, get through this moment before you begin to ask that question. For Michael Jordan, I mean, it didn't get developed, when he made it to the big time. It got developed when he was on his driveway at 17 after he got cut from the high school team. That's where the resilience began to, in the smaller moments, get developed. See, when the smaller ones come, I've got to say, okay, I got to look at this and say, okay, God, you're using this to grow me. All right, there's almost got to be a change in perspective, if you will. We got to, kind of switch the question, because most people, when adversity comes, there's a question we ask. Most people, myself included, will ask this question right here. Why is this happening to me? God, why is this happening to me right here? God, why am I going through this right here? I mean, why, seriously, you thought this was good right now? I mean, what the F were you thinking, God? You might ask that question. Maybe those are just my questions. Those are the questions I ask when the hard things come. Like, what are you thinking, God? What in the world why is this happening? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that James is like, I think you ought to ask maybe another question. Take a little different perspective. And so I'd encourage you to ask this question. It's the question of, God, what are you trying to grow in me through this? What are you trying to grow in me? I'm not going to necessarily try to figure out just the cause. I mean, we'll spend a little time there, but what is it? What's happening right here? Because whatever's happening, God can redeem it. He can redeem it, and he can bring something good out of it. I mean, there's moments where you're going to look back at that moment, you're going to go, oh my gosh, if I wouldn't have gone through that season, if I wouldn't have gone through that when I was 17 years old on the basketball floor, having to be out for a year, go through rehab, I thought my whole life was going to be around sports, having to reevaluate my purpose. If I would have gone through that adversity, I can guarantee you I wouldn't be here today. God used that to build something. But it wasn't just for today, it's for tomorrow. And listen, I don't have to tell you this. You probably feel it every day. We live in a dangerous and broken world. There's all kinds of things around us that can take us down. And I think as modern day people, I think in our modern day, we're more vulnerable than perhaps any time in human history. I think there's more to take us out than ever before. And yet my prayer is that God would just emblazon on our hearts. God would tattoo on our hearts, this idea that even though we may be vulnerable, we're actually stronger than we perhaps ever imagined. Because, see, we have a Heavenly Father who says, hey, I'm not leaving you. I'm here. He's like, I actually sent my Spirit, the same Spirit that was used from the grave. You actually have access to that. I'm the God of the mountain. I'm the God when things are good. I'm the God of the valleys. I'm the God of the bad. And Jesus even reminds us of this. Now, sometimes we hold on to promises that Jesus never said, like the things we thought Jesus said. Like sometimes we're like, I thought you said, God, that if I follow you, everything's always going to be great. Everything's always going to be the way I want it to be. That was last week, and that was the Barbie movie, by the way, because that's Barbie world. But that's not true. We know that's not true. There's all kinds of pain. You can have faith in Jesus. You can begin to follow Jesus, and you're still going to, at times, it doesn't make you impervious to pain. I mean, sometimes James is a great example of that, Jesus' brother. I mean, sometimes it gets worse. But Jesus reminds us, and this is one of his promises, this little verse that sometimes I'll often use at funerals. And I love this verse because it holds both the reality of our present, but also the hope of the future, where Jesus says, hey, I've told you these things so that in me, when you put the weight of your life and your hope in me, you will have peace. In fact, we're going to sing a song in a moment that talks about, man, regardless of what's going on, God actually can bring a renewing. He can actually bring a peace in the midst of darkness. There's a redeeming work he's doing. And then he goes on and says, oh, yeah, by the way, in this world, you're going to have trouble, by the way. He didn't say you might. He said, you will. He said, yes. And we get that. We're like, God, I don't disagree with you. I've had my share of trouble. We all agree, you know, that we understand that in this world, we're going to have trouble. But then he gives this little phrase right here, 3 little words. He says, but take heart. In other words, he's saying, be encouraged. He says, take heart. And then he gives us 5 words right after this. And these are 5 powerful words. He says, for I have overcome the world. And when Jesus said this, his team, his disciples had no idea what he was talking about. They hadn't seen him die and be resurrected. They had no clue what he was referring to. They didn't understand the reality. He's just begging them. He's challenging them. Listen, trouble's coming. When you experience trouble, take heart. Recognize I'm doing something in it. I'm doing something in you. I didn't cause it. I hate that it's happening. I want you to know it's not going to be lost. I want you to know it's going to be redeemed. It's not going to be wasted. For whatever you can muster up, whatever assurance you can muster up, I just want you to trust that I'm going to use it for your good. And in the middle of all that, I'm actually going to build resilience in you. It's going to make you better. It's going to make you more complete. It's going to make you more mature. You may remember that old movie, Jerry Maguire. You guys remember Jerry Maguire? Movie Jerry Maguire? Yeah, what was that famous line out of Jerry Maguire? Anybody remember? Show me the money, yeah. Anybody remember the second most famous line out of the movie? Anybody? You complete me. Yes, you complete me. You know, as I was thinking about this, maybe that's what God wants to do with our trials. Maybe it sounds crazy, I know, but maybe he wants us to look at our trials and go, you know what, I hate you. I hate the trial. I hate the thing I'm going through. All right, I don't want you in my life, but guess what? You complete me. You actually complete me because where I'm going, I've got to go through it in order to be developed for the next thing. See, I don't know why, you know, you might be having to be facing moving. I don't know why maybe your job is difficult or lost or why you wish you could find another one and you can't. I don't know why the finances are in trouble. I mean, there's a lot of questions that we can't fully answer. What I can tell you is God will use it. God will use it, and the pain and the struggle, he will complete you as you go through this. Because here's the thing, building resiliency, it doesn't happen passively. Does not happen passively. We can hope for it. We can wish for it. Say, God, I want you to develop this in me. We can wish there's some magic pixie dust that can just be sprinkled over us and make it happen. But you got to fight for it. You got to not back down. You got to stand up. You got to step into it. You got to show up and you got to walk into it, even when it seems scary. And when we do that, God says, man, I will not waste this. I am going to prepare you not only through this moment, but for tomorrow. So I want to pray for us as we go through this. Let's stand and let me just pray for us because I'm confident there's something on our mind that all of us are working through right now. God, thank you for being a good, good Father, for being the God of the good, the God of the mountaintop, the God of the valley, the God of the bad. In the midst of those things, you promise us you will not waste any of those moments. And if we're going through something pretty massive right now that's created some pretty big disruption, we're not even sure what the end result's going to be. God, I just pray that we would just see your hand in it. We'd be able to see your redeeming work. And God, for those of us who perhaps have just been experiencing some disruption, help us to pay attention. Help us to pay attention to the little moments and to not actually avoid them, but to say, okay, God, what do you want to teach me right here? And perhaps maybe even some of us were ready to say, you know, Jesus, I want that kind of peace. I mean, I'm going through some stuff, and I want to know the peace you bring. And I want to trust you. I want to put the weight of who I am in you. You said, you know, if you trust me, you'll have that kind of peace. And if that's where you are right now, you can do that right now and know that as you're receiving that from your Heavenly Father through Jesus, He's receiving you. And so Jesus, I just pray that you help us to become the people you create us to be. And we know to do that, we've got to go through the trials. And so just encourage our spirits right now, encourage our hearts, remind us that your power is greater than ours and that your Spirit is available. We just want to feel that. I pray there's a fresh wind of that blowing through our lives, through our circumstances, and that you would develop us in the process. And we pray these things, Jesus, according to your character. Amen.
Come awaken the city. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble. I hear the chains hit the ground. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble. I hear the chains hit the ground. God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. The darkness light it up, light it up. Oh God, every revival, let hope rise, let heaven overcome. Even already won. Oh God, every revival. Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble. I hear the chains hit the ground. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble. I hear the chains hit the ground. God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble. I hear the chains hit the ground. Oh God, every revival, pour it out, pour it out.
Hey, be encouraged. Whatever adversity you may be experiencing, God is right there. And He's doing some pretty amazing work. Look for His hand this week. Now, if you took a next step today, you can let us know that on your connection card. And if you made the choice to take advantage of the goodness and grace that Jesus brings to us by taking a step to trust Him as your Savior and leader, we'd love to celebrate that with you. So again, let us know on your connection card. And if you'd like someone to pray with you today, simply text the keyword "need prayer" to 317-834-7373, and a member of our prayer team will be in touch with you. For those of you who are givers, I just want to say thank you. You make all of this possible with your generosity through the Joy Box. In fact, your generosity fuels things like this. Wow, we've had hundreds of people on our campus last weekend through the Carpool Cinema and our Back to School Bash, and people like you made that happen. If you want to become a giver, you can go to the Give button at the top of the screen or crosspointweb.org/give, and know that when you do, you're empowering all the crazy goodness and hope that comes out of this place, all of which helps people find their way to God. I personally want to thank you for that. Can't wait to see you next time at the movies. Have an incredible week.